The restaurant went completely silent when the billionaire's wife slapped a handwritten note onto the table and sneered at the young waitress, calling her illiterate in front of nearly 100 wealthy guests. The waitress stood frozen, her hands trembling around the order pad she had been carrying. A few people lowered their eyes. Others quietly watched, waiting to see whether she would apologize. But nobody expected what happened next. Because the young woman everyone had just humiliated was about to reveal something that would change the way that entire room saw her forever. Before we begin, if you believe kindness can change a person's life and that everyone deserves a second chance, please like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear this story, and subscribe to Compassion Chronicles for more emotional stories. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching from today? Now, let's begin. The young waitress was named Seraphina Vale, and at 24, she had already learned that life could be painfully unfair. She worked 6 days a week at the prestigious Belmont Grand, one of the most expensive restaurants in the city. Its marble floors, crystal chandeliers, gold-trimmed walls, and private dining rooms attracted celebrities, politicians, and business tycoons. Seraphina, however, had grown up in a small apartment with her grandmother, where every dollar had to be stretched carefully. Her mother had passed away when she was young, and her father had disappeared from their lives years earlier. Seraphina had dreamed of attending university, but when her grandmother became ill, those dreams were put aside. She took whatever work she could find, quietly carrying the responsibility of an entire household on her shoulders. That evening, the Belmont Grand was hosting one of its most important dinners of the year. At the center of the main dining room sat Lucian Crowe, a billionaire known for building a technology empire from nothing, beside his wife, Evelina Crowe, a woman famous for her expensive jewelry, flawless appearance, and unforgiving attitude toward anyone she considered beneath her. Seraphina approached their table with a gentle smile and asked whether they were ready to order. Evelina barely looked at her before speaking rapidly about a complicated series of dishes, special preparations, and imported ingredients. Seraphina carefully wrote everything down, but when she returned a few minutes later to confirm one item, Evelina's expression suddenly hardened. She accused Seraphina of writing the order incorrectly. Seraphina politely explained that she had written exactly what Evelina had requested, but instead of listening, Evelina grabbed the order pad from her hand and held it up for the surrounding tables to see. She laughed and announced that perhaps the restaurant should hire people who could actually read and write properly. Then she called Seraphina illiterate. The word traveled across the room like a slap. Several guests turned their heads. Someone quietly gasped. Seraphina's cheeks burned, but she stood there without arguing. What Evelina didn't know was that Seraphina's handwriting looked unusual because she had learned to write with her left hand after an accident had injured her dominant hand during childhood. She had also developed a habit of writing quickly using abbreviations she had learned from years of restaurant work. It was not elegant, but it was accurate. Every order she had taken that evening had been correct. Still, Seraphina lowered her eyes and apologized for the misunderstanding. That should have been the end of it. But Evelina wasn't finished. She told Seraphina that people like her should be grateful just to work in a place where people like the Crows dined. The words hurt more than the insult about her education. Seraphina looked around and saw dozens of people watching her, but nobody stepped forward. Then Lucian quietly asked to see the order pad. Evelina rolled her eyes and told him there was no need. But Lucian insisted. Seraphina handed it to him. He studied the page for several seconds, then looked at his wife with an expression she had never seen before. He asked the restaurant manager to bring him the original kitchen ticket. When it arrived, everyone waited. The manager compared the two documents and slowly confirmed that Seraphina's written order matched the kitchen ticket perfectly. A murmur moved through the dining room. But Seraphina still said nothing. Then Lucian noticed something else. At the bottom of the order pad was a small handwritten note beside one of the dishes. He asked Seraphina what it meant. She hesitated before explaining that the note was a reminder for the kitchen to prepare a softer portion for an elderly guest at another table because she had noticed the woman struggling to chew her food earlier. Lucian looked toward the elderly woman. She nodded with tears in her eyes. Seraphina had remembered something no one had asked her to remember. That was when Lucian asked her the question that changed everything. He asked whether she had really been given the opportunity to study. Seraphina smiled sadly and explained that she had received a scholarship offer years ago, but she couldn't accept it because her grandmother needed her. She had worked instead, saved what little she could, and taught herself everything she had been unable to learn in school. She had spent nights reading library books, studying business, practicing writing, and learning languages from free lessons online. The room became painfully quiet. Then Seraphina did something nobody expected. She reached into her apron and pulled out a folded envelope. She explained that earlier that morning, she had received an acceptance letter for an adult education program that could eventually help her earn the qualifications she had once dreamed of. She had been planning to celebrate after work. Evelina stared at her, suddenly unable to speak. Seraphina looked at the woman who had humiliated her and calmly said that being educated was a privilege, but kindness was a choice. She said she might not have a university degree yet, but she knew what it felt like to struggle, and she would never use another person's hardship to make herself feel important. Nobody moved. Nobody whispered. Even the wealthy guests who had watched silently now looked uncomfortable. Lucian stood from his chair and apologized to Seraphina, not because he had caused the insult, but because he realized he had remained silent while someone was being treated unfairly. He then announced that his foundation would provide scholarships for restaurant workers who had been forced to abandon their education because of family responsibilities. Evelina slowly removed one of her diamond bracelets and stared at it. For the first time that evening, the jewelry seemed meaningless. She looked at Seraphina and quietly apologized. Seraphina did not immediately accept the apology. Instead, she simply told Evelina that she hoped she would remember how it felt to be wrong about someone. Months later, Seraphina returned to the Belmont Grand, but not wearing a waitress uniform. She had completed her first academic program and had been hired by Lucian's foundation to help create scholarships for workers like herself. Her grandmother was sitting proudly at the front table that night. And when Seraphina walked into the restaurant, the same room that had once watched her humiliation now stood and applauded. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who believes that kindness matters, and subscribe to Compassion Chronicles. Your support helps us bring more stories of courage, dignity, and second chances to people around the world. And before we end, comment, kindness is strength, if you believe we should never judge someone by their clothes, job, education, or social status. Because sometimes the person we look down on is the very person who teaches us what dignity truly means. Seraphina didn't become powerful because someone gave her a title or a fortune. She became powerful because, even after the world tried to make her feel small, she refused to become cruel.